everybody. Today's book is very special because a couple years ago, one of my students gave me this as a present. And the title is Mrs. Ritzler's Amazing Alphabet Adventure. And if you look really closely, you'll see in every picture, they used a picture of me going on an alphabet adventure. So let's get started. Mrs. Ritzler embarks on a great adventure through the alphabet. She is very excited to discover many wonderful things during her journey. Mrs. Ritzler, the artist, autographs her paintings. The antelope, alpaca, and armadillo are all amazed by her artwork. Can Mrs. Ritzler draw other animals or an apple? Mrs. Ritzler basks on the bright, balmy beach by her blocks and her bucket. Her toy boat is behind the colorful ball. How big of a tower can Mrs. Ritzler build with her blocks? What is blue and what is green? I love going to the beach. Cool! Mrs. Ritzler camps in the canyon with a bright red canoe far from her home in St. Raphael's School. A couple of camels consider crossing the river while a condor circles overhead. Can Mrs. Ritzler count the cows? Where are the carrots and the chair? Mrs. Ritzler dives in the deep blue sea with dolphins and a dozen damselfish. Will she discover the diamonds as she heads down? I hope so. The elephant and Mrs. Ritzler explore the environment while some hungry egrets eye the eggplant Mrs. Ritzler holds. Does Mrs. Ritzler see the enormous earring and eyelashes? What a fun day Mrs. Ritzler has on the Ferris wheel with her friends the flamingo, the falcon, and some foxes. How fantastic! Can Mrs. Ritzler find the number 5, or a frog, or a flower? A tall giraffe greets Mrs. Ritzler as she gardens in a greenhouse. The gray goose gazes from behind the flowers. What can Mrs. Ritzler grow in a garden? When would she wear gloves? Hold on. Mrs. Ritzler and a hedgehog head home to St. Raphael's School in a hot air balloon. A helicopter hovers nearby. How high can Mrs. Ritzler hold her hands? Can Mrs. Ritzler find a hang glider, a horse, and a hippopotamus? Isn't it interesting to see Mrs. Ritzler ice skate inside the arena while holding an ice cream cone? Some tiny insects are inspired by seeing Mrs. Ritzler in first place. Can Mrs. Ritzler identify ice? Is ice hot or cold? What happens to ice when it's warm? A trio of jaguars watches Mrs. Ritzler juggle some jumbo jelly beans while she jumps over the jungle stream. What colors are the jelly beans that Mrs. Ritzler juggles? What else could Mrs. Ritzler juggle? Mrs. Ritzler kayaks past a kangaroo and a koala bear heading down the river. She is amused to see king salmon jump from the water and kiss. Can Mrs. Ritzler tie a knot to help keep her boat at the shore? Look, look, it's Mrs. Ritzler in the lighthouse along with a large llama and a little lamb. Some lizards are lounging on the ledge. Where is Mrs. Ritzler's lantern located? Mrs. Ritzler rides a mountain bike past a mule in the barn. She moves right through the middle of a mushroom patch on the hill. How many mushrooms can Mrs. Ritzler see? Can you find on the map where Mrs. Ritzler lives? Extra, extra! Notice all the news about Mrs. Ritzler. The newspaper costs 9 nickels. Can Mrs. Ritzler name everyone in her family? Does Mrs. Ritzler like noodles? The ostrich and owl have feathers to help keep them warm, and the oxen have thick hides. Mrs. Ritzler wears a big overcoat to keep herself from getting cold. What can Mrs. Ritzler observe outside today? Is it hot or cold out? The puppies and parrots are particularly pleased as Mrs. Ritzler performs a perfect piece on the piano. A pair of peacocks are very proud of her too. Can Mrs. Ritzler pretend to play another instrument? The crowd is quiet as Mrs. Ritzler, the quarterback, quickly calls the play. A quartet of quails listens in. 46, 27, hike. Can Mrs. Ritzler think of a question to ask? Ready, set, go. The race is on between Mrs. Ritzler, a rhino, a raccoon, a rabbit, and a robot. They all run for the red victory ribbon. Who will reach the finish line first? Mrs. Ritzler spins around in space like a satellite. While scanning the stars, Mrs. Ritzler is quite surprised by what she sees. What else can Mrs. Ritzler find in the sky? Toot toot! Mrs. Ritzler travels on the train with her trumpet. 3 turtles and some tigers are also on this trip. Can Mrs. Ritzler make a sound like a trumpet? How about a train? Three strikes and you're out. Mrs. Ritzler stands up before the last pitch. As an umpire, she needs to understand the rules of the game. Can Mrs. Ritzler find someone under the umbrella? What does Mrs. Ritzler usually do each day? Mrs. Ritzler volunteers to make a variety of vegetables for very hungry people. Her instructional videos are very popular. What vegetables does Mrs. Ritzler like the best? Mrs. Ritzler goes whizzing by as she wakeboards past the waterfall. Wow! A walrus wonders how far she will ride. Why would Mrs. Ritzler wear a watch? What makes a windmill spin? Dr. Mrs. Ritzler examines an X-ray near a xylophone. How exciting to see the bones. Can Mrs. Ritzler draw the letter X with a pen? Can she also use sign language to make the letter X? Yee-haw! Mrs. Ritzler wears a yellow jacket while riding on a big old yak. Together they find a yo-yo in a basket of yams. Can Mrs. Ritzler shake her head yes? How about no? Isn't it zany? Mrs. Ritzler is a zoologist who studies zebras and other wild animals. She always checks the zipper on her jacket before zooming in on the action. Is Mrs. Ritzler wearing a zipper right now? Can she zigzag across the room? This chapter of Mrs. Ritzler's Alphabet Adventures comes to a close. But exploring the world can be a lifetime journey of fun and excitement for Mrs. Ritzler. And the sign says, Mrs. Ritzler's amazing alphabet adventure ahead. Keep reading. So I hope you have lots of adventures this weekend and have a great day. Bye.